Have you ever met a celebrity? Well, I have. Now, this might date me somewhat, but when I was young, I used to watch Donny Marie Osmond, of course, in the classic show. You know, she's a little bit country, he's a little bit rock and roll, and I was a huge fan of Donny Osmond. So I went downtown to hear him when he was in Joseph and the Technicolor Dreamcoat. And like a foolish young girl, my girlfriend and I waited behind the stage just to see if we can get a glimpse of Donny. And he showed up. He actually came out and he had this silk white scarf around his throat, of course, to protect those vocal cords. And he stopped and he talked to us. I mean, this was too much. So we had this great talk and shared our moments of just feeling like I'd known Donny all my life. But here's the reality. I don't really know Donny. I mean, I followed him, you know, on the TV show, probably in the magazines as a little girl, and I met him face to face, but I don't really know Donny. And you know what? This can be a little like our relationship with God. You see, sometimes we think we know a lot about God. In fact, you know, we almost make him a celebrity and we're excited, almost a fan of God, but we actually don't know God. You know, there's a story in the Bible, the guy's name is Job, and it's a really depressing story on so many levels because he goes through all of these difficult things, and we hear of this journey of his struggle. And at the very, very end of this book, during this terrible suffering, Job says these words: "I had only heard about you before, but now I've seen you with my own eyes." Now, I'm startled by this statement because at the beginning of the book of Job, God says, "Job, you're a righteous man." In fact, when Satan comes into the throne room of God, God says, "Have you seen my servant Job? He's a righteous man." So, I mean, isn't he a guy that knew God? Well, according to his words, he said he had heard about God. But now, after his suffering, he had seen him with his own eyes. You know what? Sometimes it takes our journey of suffering and pain and struggle in our life to actually know God. You know, there's a time when God asked me to leave my job, a job I love. I'd spent years in teaching, and I knew it was very clear He was asking me to leave it, and it was such a struggle for me to trust God on that. There's times when God has asked me to do things that I just actually couldn't see the future clearly, but He asked me to trust Him. And you know what? All of those things helped me know God better. Every time I stepped out and believed Him and trusted Him, I found that I knew Him better. You know, God comes to you, and He comes to you when you call on Him in your suffering, and He moves, it will move from head knowledge of God and maybe being a fan of God to actually knowing God, because He meets you right in your journey. He meets you in your suffering. You will move from head to heart to personally knowing God. You see, He came to Job in his distress and his questioning. He responded to his questions, and He was present with him. And that's why Job could say, you know, I'd heard about you before, but man, now I have seen you with my own eyes. I can tell you that it's in those difficult times, and even in some of the times of success in my life, where I've trusted God or I've brought my questions to God, and I can say now, you know, I'd heard about you before, but now I actually see you. And you too, maybe you're a fan of God and you've heard of God before, but if you'd move from a place of just knowing about Him to a place of actually trusting and believing in Him with your life, you will be able to say, I now see you with my own eyes. I'm Lorie Hartshorn.